Well, hello everybody, and welcome to week 4 of our October online program for the alumni of the Sunshine Coast Health Center. And this week, I'm going to talk about sort of the process of finding a mission. And there's a pretty cool book. It's on phobias and anxiety, written by a psychologist by the name of Edmund Bourne. Anyway, he's got this really fantastic chapter, chapter 6. And the title of this chapter is Find Your Unique Purpose, which is kind of interesting to find that chapter in the middle of a workbook on helping yourself with anxiety and phobias. Anyway, he outlines in here several steps. But let me give you an example, rather than going through all these various steps. Let me give you an example of this. And the best example that I can think of is Bill Wilson. So Bill Wilson, Bill W., the motivating force behind Alcoholics Anonymous. He's really a wonderful example of how to get recovery. I'm always amazed by Bill Wilson, because when I imagine what it was like in the 1930s for him to sober up with no help really, and all the doctors tell him, "I'm sorry, Bill, but you're a hopeless alcoholic. You're going to end up in a sanitarium with drool coming down your mouth, and there's nothing we can do." So he's faced with this. At any rate, he manages, of course, to sober up. And I often ask the fellows here, how do you think Bill Wilson actually pulled off this trick? How did he actually manage to sober up? Well, we know from the historians that he was not particularly good at following the spiritual principles. And in some books, such as the one written by his wife's confidant, we get a lot of details in there. And if you actually really start delving into the history, it's kind of fascinating what he did. So we're not dealing with a perfect person by any stretch of imagination. And in fact, one of the great things about Bill Wilson is he's the first to admit that. So that was actually pretty cool. But anyway, if you look at the pattern of his life after he sobered up, there's just one thing that's constantly in focus. And that was his purpose in life, which was, of course, to spread the word of Alcoholics Anonymous. And he became the guru, the teacher, the coach, the diplomat, the advertiser, everything, the front man, everything for Alcoholics Anonymous. And it must have been incredibly rewarding to him as a human being to find it spread like this, to help so many people. He won 2 huge awards for this work. Many people believe that he absolutely revolutionized the treatment for addiction. So it was pretty incredible stuff that he accomplished. And thankfully for all of us, Bill Wilson was the guy who did this. But Wilson, if you track what he was doing, he follows Edmund Bourne's sort of step-by-step progression to finding purpose in life. And the first step is to get some research done. Figure out what on earth is alcoholism. So he did. He talked to everybody. He had Dr. Silkworth he talked to, Carl Jung. He had read all of Jung's works. He had read William James, The Varieties of Religious Experience. Talking to Bill Shoemaker from the Oxford group. Talking to all his alcoholic buddies. He's getting a lot of information going here. So he's doing research for it. Okay? As a step 1, and that was Bourne, so I'm just going to borrow some of Bourne's works to remind myself here. So step 1, do some research, and then acquire the necessary skills is step 2 for Dr. Bourne. Now, acquire the necessary skills. Bill Wilson, of course, would ask hospitals if he could come in and talk to the alcoholics. And the hospitals, because they didn't know what to do, said, "Sure, yeah, come on in." And actually making some progress with these alcoholics. But all the time honing his skills. Right? It wasn't like he just up and sat down, wrote out the 12 steps, there it is, everything's together. No, this took time, right? And tripping over himself and all this kind of stuff. So in a sense, he's done the research, but also now he's acquired the necessary training. He's figuring out what works and what doesn't work, all that kind of stuff. Step 3, persevere. So Dr. Bourne says this is fundamental to find your purpose. Persevere. It's going to be no help at all finding your purpose in life. Is the first time you run into a challenge, you say, screw it, I'm out of here, I'm getting drunk, right? That's just not going to work. So you got to persevere, which is what Bill Wilson did, right? Persevere. And it's not like this was a nice, smooth road and everybody liked him, right? No, this is like he had to fight through things. There were lots of challenges. Even in the early AA meetings where he had to help people understand the spirit of it, because some of those early meetings were pretty much against all the spiritual principles. So persevere and keep going. And watch out for negative self-talk. I mean, Bill Wilson was not always happy all the time. You know, he questioned himself, he understood he was not a perfect person, and yet, but he would catch himself, and every time he would get negative, and this is one of the great things about his wife, Lois, is she would provide this stability for him, give him some perspective on things, and so that any negative self-talk that came in would be so he wouldn't dwell on it, and he could pursue it. Number 5, trust that the universe will support you. And this is one of these concepts that, as those of you who are in AA or NA or CA or any of the 12-step programs know, right? This concept of the higher power will support you along the way. And all you have to do is put the legwork in, and whatever happens will happen. And so, but you got to have this faith that things will work out, that all of this effort, all of this energy, and all of the bad times and everything are actually going to be worth it in the end. And then number 6, set aside time each day. Well, basically what that means is you actually have to focus on it, right? So Bill Wilson, obviously, he invite people, all these alcoholics, into his own home. I'm not sure Lois was too thrilled about that, but this was the kind of activity he did very regularly. In other words, he's always focused on this purpose, on this mission to spread the word of AA. So I often think that Bill Wilson is a wonderful example of recovery, and he just he happens to fit Dr. Bourne's 6-step progression. If you're more interested in the 6 steps, it's on the written portion of the program, which, as always, read it. We've got a few questions for you. Fill it out, send them in. And at any rate, that's October. So November, we'll see you next week with a new theme.